How's it going, YouTube? It's Elliot here. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another Elliot Reads, guys. I am going to be going through my April wrap-up. I read, again, 6 books in April, and I'm going to go through them and give you my ratings, my opinions, and things on them. So yeah, let's get into it. The first one that I read was Sleepless by Romy Hausman. This is a thriller, mystery, crime genre novel, and this is about Nadja, a girl called Nadja who got convicted of murdering her mum when she was a young girl, and she obviously done her time and she gets out of prison and she just wants to have like a normal life and things and get back to normality and get a job and things. The lawyer who was looking after her, he gets her a job at his partnered law firm because he's partnered with someone else, so he gets her job at that law firm where he owns. And she's like a receptionist there. The other owner, called Van Hoven, his wife also works there, and her and Nadja became good friends when she got out of prison. And she had like a bit of normality. She had a bit of friends. She had a job. She was doing good. And then Laura had a baby because she was pregnant, and she brought the baby to the office to meet everyone and show the baby off. And as the baby was getting like shown around and passed from person to person, and the parents were like mingling with their friends in the office and having a chat, the baby went missing. And the only person who wasn't there was Nadja. And so Van Hoven, the husband, goes and looks for Nadja to see if he can find out where she's gone with the baby. And he finds her on the roof with the baby, at the edge. And he makes her get away from the edge, and she tells him it was because her brother had asthma when he was younger, and she doesn't like babies being around people who are smoking and things because it was legal to smoke in them days in buildings. So she took the baby out for some fresh air just to get it away from the smokiness of the room. The couple never forgave her for doing that, because it sent panic waves, and obviously Van Hoven thought she was going to jump with the baby, so they kept that grudge against her. And then the wife of Van Hoven, Laura, she starts having an affair with a photographer who works at the firm. She has that affair with him, and she ends up killing the guy she's having an affair with for some reason, and have like a confrontation, and then she stabs him. So she rings her husband, because obviously he's a lawyer and he knows how to bend the law and like avoid prison time. So he goes and assesses the situation of what's going on. And because they have that grudge against Nadja, he tells Laura to ring Nadja and ask if she'll help with burying the body, like covering up, burying the body. So that's what she does. She goes to the law firm because Nadja's still working when she goes there, and she tells her what she's done. And of course, with Nadja thinking that Laura's still her friend, she agrees to help Laura cover up, and they take separate cars, and then she's like, right, I'll meet you at the location we're going to bury the body. You go take my car, and you go ahead. So her DNA will be all over the car and things like that, and then they can say like, right, okay, it was her, she's killed again, she's done it in the past, she's unhinged and things like that. And yeah, that's kind of what it is. I gave it 3 stars because it was very confusing to follow. It would just like flip between certain things. You didn't know where you were with it at some point. I got the gist of what it was like, it was about, but it was very confusing to follow. I almost didn't finish it. I almost DNF'd it. But I didn't, and I did read it. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars. That was my first read of April. Okay guys, the next one I read was Darkest Fear by Harlan Coben, and this is a mystery thriller suspense crime book. This is about a sports journalist and basketballer called Myron, and when things are slow in his business, like he's reporting business, so he does investigations on the side when business is slow with his 2 colleagues, and his ex-girlfriend shows up out of the blue, called Emily, and she tells Myron that her son has bone marrow cancer, and the only way to save him is to get a bone marrow transplant. And they found a donor that matched his bone marrow, but the guy has gone missing. He's just like gone MIA, and no one knows where he is or what happened to him. So she comes to Myron for help to try and track this guy down. And like Marion's like, yeah, I'm sorry that your kid's dying and everything, but what's this got to do with me? Why have you come to me for help after you haven't spoken to us since you broke my heart and things? And she drops the bombshell that this kid is actually his, and he's called Jeremy. And yeah, so that ropes him into helping. So he tries to track down the bone marrow donor, and it leads him to a rich family who are trying to cover up a big secret about the guy who is on the register for the bone marrow. And then he finds out that actually the guy's identity has been stolen by another person because he's actually in a hospital. He actually had an accident a while back and it caused him to be like brain dead and things. So he's in the hospital, so he can't use his identity, so he's like pretty much dead, in other words, because, you know, he's on life support and things. And the family are paying to keep him alive because they can afford it, and it's private hospital and things. And it leads him to a reporter who reported on a serial killer who abducted like college students and couples and things. And this reporter somehow got an interview with the killer, but he wouldn't reveal his sources. So the FBI are very interested in this guy, this reporter, and they've got him under surveillance. This reporter, everything that the guy finds out about this Alex, this fake Alex, leads him to this reporter, and he tries to get out of this reporter what the deal is, why he's connected to this fake Alex, and how we can find this fake Alex to help Jeremy get his bone marrow transplant. That's pretty much what it's about. But there is a big twist. I won't spoil it because, like, if I go into any more detail of what actually happens, I'll spoil it. So I don't want to really spoil it for you guys. But I gave it 4 stars, guys. It was really good, really gripping read. It really keeps you wanting to read more and find out who this fake Alex is and what connections that Myron can find. And if he actually does find this fake Alex who actually is the bone marrow donor for his son, see if he saves his son. But it is a really good read, guys. I gave it 4 stars. I highly recommend it. So yeah, that was the second book I read for April. So the next one I read was The Reaper by Peter Lovesey. Okay, this one is about a killer priest, like a young priest called Otis, and he comes to the town of Foxford to be a priest there, and he's been known to dwindle funds in previous churches that he like resides in, and he's doing the same here in Foxford, which he calls his contingency fund. So they put money away from events that pay too late. So the funds that come in too late from like events and things, they go in the contingency fund, and that's for like Otis to spend on whatever he wants, because he believes that he doesn't get enough of a salary to be able to live. So him and his current bookkeeper called Stanley have this set up, and it's in like a separate bank account that can't be traced through the church's funds or anything like that. But the main bulk of the church funds go into the main church bank account. Otis kills anyone who gets to know too much about him, like his past churches that he's been to. If anyone gets to know what happened in his past churches and why he had to leave and change his name. And Stanley is one of them that he gets rid of because Stanley is planning to leave because he's becoming forgetful. There was an event that they had on, and there was some funds that came in late, and Stanley took them home because it was too late to take them to the bank, and his house got burgled, and he had to put the money into from his own account. Because of this reason, Stanley wants to leave, so he tells Otis that he wants to leave, and Otis isn't very happy with that because he doesn't want anyone else to know that he's dwindling funds from the church, because Stanley is the only one that knows about this, and he agrees that priests don't get enough money and they don't get paid enough from the diocese and things like that. So he agreed to set this up with Otis, and he doesn't want someone else to take over the books because he doesn't think they'll understand, and that they'll report him to the diocese and he'll lose priesthood and things. So he kills off Stanley. Yeah, and he tries to make it look like a suicide because of what happened with the robbery, and that he couldn't cope with losing the church funds and he like stuff like that. There's a bishop who starts to unravel his past as well, so he kills him off. He's the first victim, so he gets killed off first, and Stanley's the second victim. And so in order to keep his secret about his contingency fund, he seduces a churchgoer called Rachel, And Rachel's in a not very good relationship with her husband, and he's quite aggressive towards her, and he doesn't really show her any attention. He's quite lackluster with her, and she starts to fall in love with Otis, the priest, and she agrees to do this job, and they become really close because he has to show her the books and show her the ropes and things like that. And then her husband comes back from a trip, and he accuses her of being a cheater. And when nothing's actually happened between her and Otis yet, she just has feelings for him. He goes after Otis and like confronts him and things like this. And then she isn't happy anymore with her husband, so she pretty much poisons him and kills him. And because these murders are happening, they're starting to look suspicious, and they're starting to like point to Otis. First the bishop dies, and then the bookkeeper dies, and then this woman who he chose to take over the books, who didn't have any experience in accounting, suddenly her husband dies, so everyone starts to become very suspicious of Otis, and they think that he's the one that's finishing these people off. And then there's another priest, a young priest who's in there, like in the circle of priests. He starts to dig up everything about Otis's past, so where he went to school, what he got kicked out of his previous churches for, things like that. And then he kind of gets found out that he was the actual one that did murder these people. Well, he didn't murder obviously the woman's husband, because that was her to be with him, and he try and convinces her to run away with him and like be together somewhere else, like go to a different country and go on the run, and then start all over again in his priesthood with a different church and do it all over again, like swindle their accounts. And yeah, this was really interesting. It was really interesting reading it. I thought it would be, and I gave it 4 stars, guys, so I really recommend reading this one as well. It's really good. The next one I read was Believe Me by J.P. Delaney. This is a psychological thriller mystery book genre, and this is about Claire, who is in New York illegally. She needs a green card, and nowhere will employ her without a green card, until she comes across this law firm who specialises in entrapping cheating husbands. So they send her in as like a mark sort of thing, and she goes and tries to seduce these husbands. If they follow her up to the room, she gives the tape to their wives and be like, yep, you're right, he's a cheating scumbag, do what you will with it. They get this one client. The wife is called Stella, and she has contacted this firm for Claire to find out if her husband Patrick is a cheater or if she's just paranoid. But when Claire gets up to the room to meet the woman, she tells Claire to be careful because her husband's a bit off the rails. He's unpredictable, so she tells Claire to be careful. So Claire goes to the bar and does her thing, but Patrick doesn't take the bait. So he just leaves, and he leaves his book of poems because he's into this poet who's really dark, and he writes about like his affair with 2 women, and he kills one of the women and writes poems about it. So he's like really into this poet for some strange reason. So yeah, he's in this dark poet, so I think that's why his wife was like, be careful, he's unpredictable, he likes it, he's into this weird stuff. So yeah, so when he doesn't take the bait, they're like, well, he didn't take the bait, but she was like, I still want the money that you owe us for the thingy. And the woman, Stella, the wife, pulls out like $1,000 and gives her the money that she's owed. So she gives her the money that she's owed, which I think was $400. So she goes off, and that's the end of that. And then the police come to Claire's door saying that Stella had been murdered, and they believe that Claire was the one that murdered her because she was last person seen with Stella, and they think her motive was because she had the $1,000 in her suite and she needed it to pay away because obviously she hasn't got a green card, so she can't really work properly, and the stints with the law firm are when she's needed. So it's not like a stable schedule. She doesn't know she's going to get work and when she's going to get work, so she needs other ways to get money. So that's what the police believe her motive is. But then also the husband's under suspicion because Stella was obviously like, he's dangerous, he's unpredictable, blah blah blah. So the police are under suspicion about him, especially since he likes this dark poet, and the poet's like, he quotes this poet quite a lot, and he's wrote like a play on this poet. So what the FBI do is they try to use her acting, like Claire's acting skills that she did in the law firm, to transfer that over to their investigation. So they send her in as another mark to try and make Patrick fall in love with her, so he'll trust her enough to reveal his dark secrets, like obviously like killed Stella. because that's all they want. They want a confession that he killed Stella so they can put him away and things like that. But the only problem is that she starts to fall in love with him, and she doesn't believe that he killed Stella and that the police are both trying to set both of them up. And it turns out the FBI was actually putting them against each other. They were both in on this sting without the other one knowing. And Claire doesn't find out that he was working with the FBI as well, trying to get her to confess, until she finds microphones in his bathroom. And yeah, she kicks off, and then it all becomes too much fun. She actually ends up in a psychiatric ward, which is really crazy. Patrick comes and bails her out of the psychiatric ward and lets her live with him, which is very bizarre. So she's still suspicious that he's still working with the FBI. She's saying, how can I trust you if you lied to me previously about working with them and I think you're still working with them and things. And she becomes very paranoid. And then she starts getting poems from the book left to her, and things like that. So it starts to freak her out, and she becomes very, very paranoid that she can't trust Patrick, but she's still in love with him. So she tries to still trust him and believe that he didn't kill Stella. And then they actually both fall in love with each other and go to Paris. And yeah, things take a turn in Paris, and we actually find out who the actual killer was, which one of them actually killed Stella. Because these were only two suspects that they are, so it was either one of them that killed her. And we actually found out who it is when they get to Paris. And yeah, it was really, really good. I've thoroughly enjoyed this book. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did, but I really, really enjoyed it. I couldn't put it down. It was so good. Really, really enjoyed it. Keeps you interested all the way through. It doesn't dip anywhere. It's really, really good. It's just consistent suspense all the way through, and it's really, really good. I gave it 5 stars, so I thoroughly enjoyed it, guys. So I highly recommend picking up this book if you can. The 5th book I read was The Lost by Simon Beckett. This is about a father called Jonah who worked as a firearms officer in the police force. And he's got a son called Theo and a wife. He's got a wife as well, and the wife in his relationship isn't very good at the moment. They're not in love anymore. They're very distant with each other, but they're staying together for Theo and just playing happy families because they don't want to destroy Theo. They don't want Theo to think anything's wrong and for him to come from a broken home. So they just grin and bear it and just carry on with each other. So Jonah gets back from a night shift at the police station, and he only gets about 3 hours sleep that night. And the wife's like, right, I've got to go out, so you're looking after Theo today. So him on little sleep is absolutely knackered, but he takes Theo out to the park anyways to just do activities and keep him happy and burn off his energy. Theo asks for 5 more minutes in the park, as kids do. They're like, no, I don't want to go yet, I want 5 more minutes. So he's like, fine, 5 more minutes, and he sits on a bench and he's looking around. He sees a woman with a pram, a man with a pram, and then he sees this homeless guy drinking on another bench, and then he's watching his son play in the park, and then he drifts off to sleep. And then when he finally wakes up, the guy on the bench is gone, the mum with the pram's gone, and Theo's also gone. So he panics and he tries to find Theo, looking in the slides and things and shouting his name, and he finds his hat on the grass and no Theo. So he thinks automatically that Theo's been abducted because he saw that shady guy, that shady homeless guy on the bench. So he thinks that he's took him. So he reports it to the police. The police find the guy, but they don't find Theo with him, and there's no reason to think that he took Theo. So then they do an investigation of the park, and there's an underground tunnel system that only a kid can fit into. So they believe that Theo went into that tunnel system and he basically drowned because he couldn't get back out, and he couldn't find his way back, and he just drowned. So that's what Jonah believed for all them years, that Theo just drowned. And so after this happened, him and his wife get a divorce. Obviously what happened, she's not happy with him, and yeah, that kind of breaks their marriage apart even more, and they're just divorced. So they're living in separate houses now, and she remarries and has kids with that guy who she's with. And then out of the blue, 10 years later, out of the blue, Jonah gets a call from one of his best friends who used to work in the service with him, and he says that he's got himself into some big trouble. So yeah, he's like, fine, fair enough, you were my friend and you need help, so I'll come and help you. So he goes to this warehouse and he finds the bodies of 4 people, including Gavin, who rang him. He watches them pretty much get dragged away and murdered, and then he gets tied up in this thing himself, but he manages to get out and fight the guy who's doing it, the killer. He manages to free himself and fight this guy off, and then the guy gets scared and runs off. So he picks up his phone and obviously rings the cops and is like, look, I'm at this warehouse, this has happened, please come here, there's dead bodies and things. So they go to that, and when they get there, they only find 3 bodies, and Gavin's body is missing, and Jonah is the only one alive. And obviously Jonah's body's still there because he's the only one that's alive. So he becomes under suspicion because he's the only survivor. But the FBI are very interested in the guy who he found in the park. You know, the guy who we saw on the bench in the park. The FBI are very interested in him for some reason because they believe he's wound up in some criminal trafficking gangs. So that's what Jonah thinks happened to Theo them 10 years ago. When that new information comes to light, he's like, well, that's what must have happened. That guy must have took Theo and sold him to a trafficker, and we just found his shoe and thought that he went into there. So Jonah's thinking that's what Gavin wanted him for, that he had got mixed up and found too much information, and that's why that guy was going to kill him. Because it turns out that the guy who was in the warehouse was the homeless guy. I think he's called Owen. So they think it's Owen Stork that took Theo and sold him to a child trafficking ring, and that's what Jonah thinks that Gavin was trying to tell him, that he had some information. They had tracked down this guy who sold people to traffickers, and that he was gonna pay for it. He was frightened for his life. More and more things start to get unraveled. There's a crazy twist to this. I won't say what the twist is because it'll spoil the book. But there's a crazy twist in this. I did not expect it. Really did not expect it. I thought it was Owen Stokes that was doing all this stuff, and he was the one that was the killer. But you have to read the book to find out if he is the killer or if it's someone else, guys. You'll have to see what happens in the book. Highly recommend it. Very, very gripping. Keeps you wanting to read more and not putting it down. I didn't want to put this book down either. I fully enjoyed it. And I gave it 4 stars, so yeah, highly recommend it. Okay guys, the last one I read was You Again by Lauren Lane, and this is about Mac, and she just wants no strings attached sex and just a hookup, just a hookup. She wants just a hookup, and she's on this dating app, and she's like going through the guys and just like swiping or ticking yes, whatever. And she comes across a guy called Thomas, and she doesn't really like the look of him. She doesn't think they would hit it off, so she swipes no on him, and the only problem is that Thomas is actually beside her at the bar where she is, because she's waiting for a date and he stands her up, and so she's on this app to pass the time, and then obviously she finds Thomas, swipes to no, and he's like, wow, you literally just swiped no and I'm right beside you. Why did you swipe no on us? What's the deal with that? But yeah, she thinks he's uptight and he's boring, so that's basically why she swiped no on him, and she's like, yeah, I just don't think we would click, sort of thing. And then he's like, right, okay, whatever. And he leaves. She goes into work the next day and he turns up as a boss. Very awkward. Very, very awkward. And then she's like, oh my god, no, you can't be serious, really. So they have to work together. So they're not very happy about that because it's very awkward. But they're like, right, well, be professionals because this is our job. We'll have to be professional. Put all the awkwardness aside and we'll just get on with it. Our best friend is getting married, and the guy who she's marrying is Thomas's brother. So she goes to the engagement party, and of course Thomas is there, and it's just really awkward. They're like, yeah, we've met before, he's actually my boss at work. They don't mention like that she rejected him on a date and that. Like, she tells our best friend eventually, and then obviously he's already told his brother that she rejected him on a date and that, and that's how they actually met. And they're both left to plan like the bachelorette and bachelor party. So they choose to take the couple to a spa day with like friends and things, but the only problem is all the friends are like couples, so it's just gonna be Mac on her own because Thomas is dating a girl called Anne, like currently, and so it's just gonna be Mac on her own, which is like, that's fine, I'll be alright, I don't mind. So she invites the guy who stood her up to this bachelor party at the spa, and he's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll come. And then so when Mac and Thomas are planning this bachelorette party, they have like a spark moment between them. They nearly kiss, but obviously Thomas is with Anne, so he's like, oh no, I can't do this, I'm sorry, I have to go. He breaks up with Anne, quits his job because it's too awkward, and he's not a cheat, so he's like, I'm not a cheat, so I'm gonna break up with Anne, and because he's starting to get feelings for Mac, and but she doesn't know that he's broke up with Anne. So when the spa day comes around, she's obviously asked the guy who stood her up, and he said yes, but then he bails on that again. So she rings a friend and is like, well, this guy's bailed on us, so it might take me a bit longer to get there, but I am coming. And our friend gets Thomas to pick her up and take her. And obviously Thomas shows up alone and she's like, where's Anne? And he's like, well, we broke up. So when they get to the spa retreat, they end up hooking up together for just like no strings attached sex. But then as they keep having those no strings attached sex, they start to get feelings for each other. Max starts to get feelings for him because he already had some feelings for her because obviously he broke up with his girlfriend because he wanted to kiss Mac and he didn't want to cheat on his girlfriend. But yeah, they start to fall for each other, but Mac isn't very trusting and she doesn't want a serious relationship. She doesn't want the white picket fence family life and to settle down, whereas Thomas does. So it puts a bit of a strain on them both. He tries to like break her walls down slowly and get her to trust him enough to be in a relationship and show her that it's not all doom and gloom and that you don't have to have the white picket fence family thing to be happy. I really enjoyed this book. It was it was a really nice book. It was a quick read. It wasn't that very many pages. I think it's like 200 and something pages. 250 I think it was. So it wasn't a big read and it was really good. It got to the point. It didn't drag on, which is really good. Because I know some romances like drag it out so much. But this one didn't. It was really well paced. It was an interesting read. You just wanted to see if Mac would lighten up and like actually get in a relationship with him. And it was like really nice. And yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, guys. So I highly recommend it. But yeah, those were my 6 books for the month of April, guys. That's them all there. And yeah, a few good ratings in that one. Only one disappointing one, which was Sleepless. But that's the way it goes. You can't have all winners in the book world. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this review of my books that I read. And if you did, please do smash the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. I'll catch you guys next video. Peace out, guys. Good night. Welcome to the video.